Welcome to the Head Trash Show. My name is Alexia Leachman and I'm the founder of Head Trash, home to the new and unique head trash clearance method that removes unwanted negative thoughts, feelings and emotions quickly and effectively so that you can achieve clarity, confidence and contentment in your life. My goal with this podcast is to teach you how to create some headspace by helping you to unpick what's blocking you and sharing some tips and how-tos for clearing it. Tune in every week as I share simple strategies to help you to achieve confidence and clarity in your life and business. To find out how to clear your head trash quickly and effectively using our unique method, pop over to headtrash.com to get our free download and subscribe for our free head trash clearance updates. And now for the show. Hello and welcome to the Head Trash Show. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about how you can get over your fear of public speaking. And I've got an expert who's going to help me to do that, and her name is Sarah Lloyd-Hughes. Now, what makes Sarah an expert is two things. The first thing is that she used to be absolutely and utterly terrified of public speaking. But she got over it, and she got over it so well that she now helps other people to get over their fear of public speaking too, and to become amazing speakers. She's got her own business, which is gingerpublicspeaking.com, and she's the author of a best-selling book called How to Be a Brilliant Public Speaker. So I've got a chat with her coming up in just a moment, and believe me, she is brilliant. She really shares some absolutely fantastic insights and some ways of looking at public speaking that will really help you to dissolve those fears in an almost magical way. But before I hand over to that chat, I want to just run by you what I want to do here on the Head Trash Show. And as you know, this show is all for you. It's all about helping you to unpick what's going on in your head. And as I was thinking about this a little bit more seriously one night last week when I couldn't sleep, I realised that actually what would be really helpful is if I unpicked your head trash on the show. Because let's face it, we all share similar head trash. There isn't something that one of us is going through that somebody else isn't probably going through the same thing. And what I like to encourage the people that sign up for the 5-step process that I give away is that if anybody is going through anything that they really want my help with so that they can better use the 5-step process for clearing head trash, then I really do want people to, email me, let me know what's going on for you. And what usually happens when people email me is I email them back and then we have a bit of an email conversation, and then I end up ultimately giving them a head trash clearance to-do list, the stuff that they need to clear by using our 5-step process. And I thought, well, hey, hang on a minute. This is all a bit selfish. We're keeping it to ourselves. We're keeping it to ourselves in this little email conversation. Wouldn't it be better if I actually shared what I was sharing with them, if I shared it on the show? So I thought, why not make a show of it? So what I'd like you to do is if there's anything that you would really like my help with unpicking, then what I'd like you to do is email me and let me know, and I will give you my head trash unpicking advice right here on the podcast. So all you need to do is email me and let me know how you're experiencing that head trash. How do you know you have that head trash? What is going on for you? What are the situations that bring it out in you? What are those frustrating, nightmarish situations, maybe the encounters with certain people? What's happening that makes you stressed, that makes you anxious? Tell me about this stuff and I will help you to figure it out and unpick it. Okay, so now back to today's show. As I mentioned, I've got Sarah Lloyd-Hughes who's on the show, and she is an author of How to Be Brilliant at Public Speaking, and she's got a coaching and training business to help other people be awesome public speakers. So here is the time that I spoke to Sarah Lloyd-Hughes about how you can get over your fear of public speaking. Welcome to the Head Trash Show, Sarah.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Sarah is an author of How to Be Brilliant at Public Speaking, and she also coaches and trains people in the art of public speaking through her business gingerpublicspeaking.com. So you can go and find out more about Sarah there. And she's also on Twitter at Ginger Nibbles, which I think is a fantastic Twitter handle. So thank you for joining me today, Sarah.
Very welcome, very welcome.
So you talk about the fact that you were once utterly terrified of public speaking. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was actually my biggest possible fear some years ago, and my clients always ask me, how was it that you came to be doing this for a living when you used to be terrified. And what I tell them is a story that I'll tell you just now about my first ever bit of public speaking. Because it was my biggest terror, I had, of course, left it and avoided public speaking at every possible moment until something became more important than my fear of public speaking. And that was the prospect of getting my dream job, working for a student organisation full-time after graduating. And to get this job, I had to attend a conference of 250 people where I would have to deliver a series of short speeches under pressure, time pressure. So, no small ask there. Not only public speaking, but let's add on top of it your dream job at stake. So you can imagine how I felt as I was standing outside that room. It was the Quality Hotel in Warsaw, not exotic Poland, but Birmingham. Oh. And I was waiting to go in, knowing that within the next couple of minutes I'd have to deliver this speech. And you can imagine how my body, my voice felt. Everything around me felt awkward. I felt like I had a little river running from my palms. I felt like my knees were turning to jelly. Even my hair felt awkward. And as I stood outside that room, I had no idea when I got to the front whether any single word was going to come out of my mouth whatsoever. And, you go into that sort of twilight zone, don't you? When you step into a room, and I walked through the crowd and they were very encouraging. I also went into this sort of twilight zone of really not being in control of myself, and got to the front of the room and started my speech. And all I could think about was a friend of mine who had done the same process the previous year and had completely frozen. He wasn't able to say anything other than his name. So I was just filling my head with, don't do that, don't freeze. But by the time I got to the front and, managed to start saying my words, my name and what I was doing, something clicked and managed to get through the speech. And, it wasn't one of those Hollywood moments where suddenly, kapow, everything's brilliant, fireworks and standing ovation. It wasn't like that. I wasn't particularly good. I was all right. I was, in fact, distinctly average. But the point was that I got through it. I came over my biggest possible fear. And after that, I was propelled on a journey of thinking, well, look, if I can do that, if I can get through my biggest possible fear, what else can I do? And it's from there that I think I started to develop the techniques, some of which I'll share with you today, that helped me to get rid of all that rubbish that I had in my head about public speaking.
So you mentioned some of those telltale signs there that, that come up for people if they've got a fear of public speaking. So that freezing of the not being able to utter a word, and then, sweaty palms. And I think one that I was, the other one is where your voice is just shaking. But also what other stuff typically goes on for people that have got a really bad fear of public speaking?
Yeah, I suppose I categorise it into three signs. There's three batches of signs, let's say. There's the physiological stuff, the stuff that's the most obvious. So it could be that you have an increased heart rate. It could be that you have sweaty palms, wobbles all over. And that's basically the adrenaline going into your body, getting you ready to run away. Because when we see lots of eyes looking at us, an old biological response is triggered in the mind, which reminds us of being looked at by predators. So we're ready to run. That's just a standard physiological reaction. And that's why we get feeling really nervous and full of adrenaline. So that's the kind of physiological sign. Okay. The second sign is the kind of mental, the worries, let's say. We might notice ourselves catastrophizing. And by that I mean we notice ourselves taking very seriously the possible negative consequences of what's going to happen. We say, when I speak, I'm going to fail. It's somehow certain. Everyone will think I'm stupid, not just one person in the audience, everyone. And I'll make a total and complete fool of myself. So when you notice yourself telling yourself negative things about what's about to happen, that's also a sign that you're in fear around speaking.
Okay.
And the third one, and a really interesting one that I spot that isn't so obvious, is actually that we become self-obsessed. We forget that there's even an audience often, and we find ourselves focusing on me as the most important thing in the room, as, look how terrible it is that I have to do this. And we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, but it completely is the opposite to what we should be doing as speakers. So that's another sign. When you start to notice that you don't even think about your audience, you only think about yourself and your worries, that's another sign that you're in fear of public speaking.
I see. So somebody who might actually be looking like they're doing okay. They haven't got the shakes, they haven't got a dry mouth, they don't seem to be panicking in any way, but they're just lost in their own world of them. Then that's another way of manifesting that kind of fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
And all of these things have their consequences. You know, these are supposed the secondary signs of public speaking fear, that we lose our creativity. You know, we lose our ideas or our words or our sense of humour as we speak. We get that twilight zone feeling that I was mentioning. You know, the body feels like jelly, everything feels awkward. We don't have much choice. We don't have much control over our actions in those moments. And that means that we don't know what we're doing well, and we don't know what we're doing badly. Okay. And the consequence of all of that is that we might avoid public speaking. You know, pointing to those on the podcast who, you know, make excuses as to why it's not quite right yet to do a piece of public speaking, or if we do it, we might disconnect from the audience. So we might just put our head down and charge through our material without even daring to look up and see if anyone's listening. You know, a few lecturers do that in my university. We might also over-prepare. So we think, right, okay, I've got a speech to do or a workshop to deliver. I must know everything about my subject matter. That's another sign. Another sign still is changing your personality. Like, when I think most of us will have had the experience of when we're speaking to someone important, you know, the CEO or the bank manager or someone terribly important, we change our voice. And, you know, if you look at yourself from a reasonable perspective, you're not being normal. You're very strange indeed. Or you're trying to be someone else. And these are all indications that you're not being natural as a speaker, and that you've got fear affecting your performance.
So basically, when you're on stage, if it is a stage or maybe just in front of an audience, the telltale sign, what I'm hearing, if you're doing it right, is that the person that's speaking is the same person. You know, if you get down from the stage and I chat to you in the bar area or in the networking area, you sound the same, you look the same, you're basically using the same kind of language and the same kind of voice. And if it's the same person off and on, then you're doing something right.
Absolutely.
Would that be fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's useful to know. So if you become the creature from the bog when you're on stage, and that isn't you when you're networking, then you might be doing something wrong.
Yeah, or equally the diva who get me my glass of water. You know, this is a good thing to know, actually, because we often see those people and think, wow, they're amazing, they're so special. Actually, they're probably just nervous. They're not too glamorous in the end. They're probably just nervous.
So anybody that's suffering from any of those things, you know, if you manage to recognise yourself in any of those things that Sarah's just told us, then what's going on for people typically, when people have got a fear of public speaking? You mentioned that thing earlier about that primal thing when we have all these eyes on us. I've not heard that before. That's fascinating, that sort of primal thinking, about thinking that we're going to be, hunted, basically. But other stuff that might be going on for people, typically what's going on? Yeah,
it's when we break it down, we actually find that there are three major mistakes that we're making as egocentric beings, you could say. People who are just, happily heading into public speaking without thinking about it too much. The first mistake, and this connects to that, physiological thing of seeing a load of eyes looking at us. The mistake we make is thinking that because all those eyes are looking at us, suddenly we're very important. Because we're the speaker, because everybody's looking at us. Surely that means that everyone expects us to be perfect. It means everyone expects us to be in the know, in control, and be very sort of remarkable. And that's a mistake. I can explain why, if you like.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a mistake because simply it's not true. If you think from the perspective of the audience, you can ask yourself the question, to them, who is the most important person in the room? And normally we would think, well, of course it's the speaker. But if we test it out and you go and sit in an audience, who's the most important who's the most important person in the room to you? It's yourself.
Yeah.
It's always yourself, because we're egocentric beings. So you've got a whole room of people sat in the audience thinking, okay, there's a speaker there, but how does that speaker give me something? What can that speaker do to change my life for the better? How can they contribute to me? If you remember that as a speaker, you can actually notice that what your focus should be on is not on yourself, one person. It should be on your audience, more than one person, normally. Fingers crossed. And that's a huge mindset shift. It's remarkable to see the difference when speakers focus on themselves. They get defensive, they get small, they get tight. When they focus on their audience and when they become what I call a servant speaker, their whole world expands. They start focusing on giving and on giving what they can rather than on trying to be Mr. or Mrs. Perfect.
And that sounds like a parallel to life in general, doesn't it, really?
Absolutely.
You know, people who focus on giving and providing and serving the world have a world that expands and a lot more comes to them than those that focus just purely on what they're doing for themselves, right?
Absolutely. And it removes your focus on your nerves, so you don't notice them so much anymore. You know, you could say, I'm nervous, but then think, well, what feeling do the others have in the room?
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're more nervous about the material that you're presenting than you are.
Well, especially when you start going into the audience and asking questions.
Yes, you're well seasoned.
That's what I do. When I forget what I'm going to say, I start walking around asking people if, you know, they've understood and how they're getting on, and if they've got any questions, and suddenly everyone gets incredibly nervous.
Yes, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and as long as you're making what you're saying about the people in front of you, you can't go wrong. And as you connect to them as a human being, you also connect to their needs and their hopes and their fears. And that's what they want. They don't want a speaker who is somehow completely distanced from them. They don't want a god. They want someone who they can learn from. So that's mistake number one.
Okay.
Shall I give you number two?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Mistake number two, I think it connects in a way. It's the thinking that if I'm not perfect, then there's going to be trouble. If I'm not perfect, I will fail. And so here we have, most of us have somewhere in our minds the probably quite false image of what a perfect public speaker looks like. Yeah. And often it's someone with a big grin, a big cheesy, well-manicured grin. It's someone who never splutters or stutters. It's someone who remembers precisely every single word that they've rehearsed and moves in a certain, maybe quite American way that all the big motivational speakers.
You're talking about Tony Robbins.
Hey, Tony Robbins. Now, in a sense, I'm talking not so much about Tony Robbins himself, because I've tested him out. I've went along to one of his gigs, and I thought, right, let me test you. Are you doing all right, Tony? Are you doing okay? And I think he's incredible. I think he's very authentic. I think he is just that big. You know, he's massive.
Yeah.
The problem is when people try to copy Tony Robbins or any other public speaking guru. And I saw this in action at his gig, where he his little protege, and little I mean was absolutely true, because he was about half the size of Tony Robbins, which is about the size of a normal person. And this little protege came on, and he was telling his story, but he was doing it like Mr. Robbins, and he was always deferring to Mr. Robbins, and had his actions, and was trying to get the crowd to say I, and it was a completely cringeworthy moment. Now, he had been taught either by Tony Robbins himself or one of Tony Robbins' staff that to be a good speaker, he had to be like Tony Robbins. And I think that's a real shame, because he had completely left behind his own personality. And as a result, he wasn't authentic. And I just felt a little bit, I felt myself cringing inside, because what he was doing just wasn't powerful. Now, if he had accepted himself in his own imperfections, then he would have realised that what he has is more than enough. He had a great story, he had a great personality, but he was just looking to someone else to tell him how he should be speaking, and that was the mistake, I think.
So again, a lesson from life, really. It's about being authentic and being yourself.
Yeah. So, public speaking is nothing more than an act of, or nothing less than an act of leadership. You know?
Okay.
It's and I often say this to my clients, that in standing up and speaking, you're sticking up for something. You're leading. You're trying to change something. So it might be, on the one hand, a skill that you can develop, but it's also a life lesson to stand up for yourself and for your message where it is most important. And that's the level I like to tackle public speaking on, because that makes it much more inspiring.
Yeah.
Every time you stand up, you have the potential to change someone's life.
Yeah.
You're sitting down as well.
That's definitely something that inspires me, definitely. So you mentioned there were 3 things. What's the third?
Yep. Third mistake. The third mistake is thinking that the nerves are the problem. They're thinking that nerves are a bad thing. And what I always say here is that the biggest difference between a professional speaker and a rookie speaker is not that the professional speaker doesn't experience nerves. That's not true. The difference is that the professional speaker doesn't take those nerves seriously. We all experience nerves. I get nervous when I speak, and you know what? That's a good thing. It's a sign that I'm doing something I care about. And I tell myself often that if I ever go into a public speaking gig or experience and I don't have the slightest twinge of nerves, if I'm bored by it, then I should do something else, or I should change it, change the dynamic so that I get myself more engaged with it. So yeah, that's a big mistake. We think, I hear time and time again, people come to me and say, Sarah, you know, I blush and I speak too fast and I forget my lines when I speak in public, and please help me stop my fear, and please help me stop doing those things. And actually, it's not so important, those things, whether they happen or not. What the problem is when you experience blushing and then you panic as a result of it. Blush, I blush sometimes when I speak. It doesn't mean that suddenly everything's gone wrong. It just means I'm a little bit hot.
Yeah. Or very hot.
Yeah, well, thank you. On many levels. It just means, you know, if I accept the blushing, if I think, well, okay, here I am blushing, a bit awkward, no problem, nothing happened, and allow myself to move on, then the blushing actually recedes. If I think, oh my God, I'm blushing, stop, then that's the worst thing I can do, because it will make it more and more likely that I stumble and screw up. And so by taking nerves less seriously, we actually reduce the impact of those nerves, and we have a better time doing it as well.
So it's about relabeling the experience, or reframing it so that it's framing it as a positive, rather than sort of interpreting it as a really negative thing and piling more stuff onto it as a result. So rather than thinking, oh, I'm really nervous, maybe saying, I'm really excited, I've got butterflies in my tummy, and it's not about nerves, it's because I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. It really is.
Okay, so how can you help people? What really works to help people get over public speaking then? What are the things that work really well for you and your clients?
So if we combat each of those 3 things, it's the first thought is the audience is king. I'm serving the audience. I'm trying to do my best, and my best is enough. If we're combating that, so that was in terms of focusing on yourself too much, getting self-obsessed. In terms of the second bit about being too perfect, don't worry about the perfection. You know, what's perfect anyway? Who gave us the right to say that one speaker's style is better than another speaker's style? If you look at TED.com, for example, and you see all of the different speakers and their different personalities, then you'll notice that they're all incredibly different. Some of my favourite TED Talks, some of the most popular ones, for example, Ken Robinson, his is the most viewed. He stands up. He doesn't move much because of his, I think he had polio and has a problem with his leg. He just stands there, tells a few stories with a great amount of charm, very relaxed, and he's amazing. People really enjoy him. Whereas someone like Jill Bolte-Taylor, the lady who had a stroke, and who's also a neurobiologist or neuroscientist, she's a scientist, and she talks with almost religious fervour. She's so enthusiastic. And then you've got someone like Jamie Oliver, who's also done a great TED Talk, and he's just, regular Jamie. He speaks with not proper words like ain't. And he speaks with passion. So there's all sorts of different types of speaker. There's not one perfect type of speaker. The most perfect type of speaker you can find is yourself.
Yeah.
It's being perfectly imperfect. So finding the qualities within you that make you feel most yourself. That's what we're aiming for, not to follow a list of rules which will make you more nervous rather than more natural. We want to see speakers who are real.
Yeah.
And on the point that you just made about nerves and excitement being the same thing, this piece about, gosh, the consequence of me failing is huge. If we unpick that, we can see that it's just our programming, just our way of thinking. You can imagine, let's go on a roller coaster ride together, Alexia. You can imagine two people standing with us in the queue, and you've got one person, let's say on the left side, the person who is absolutely terrified, and the person on the right side who's really looking forward to it. What do you think the person on the left side is focusing on as they're standing in the queue?
Well, they just, all, everything falling out their pockets, being sick, everything falling down, it collapsing, the car coming off the rails. I don't know, there's all sorts of things that could go on.
Sounds familiar to you.
I've seen lots of movies where it's all gone terribly wrong.
Yeah, okay, so they're taking all of these possible things that could go wrong. They're projecting forward, they're seeing themselves on the roller coaster, they're anticipating a negative outcome, and they label that fear. On the other side, we've got that person who's really excited, and what do you think they're focusing on?
Well, that would be me. So I just like, how loud can I scream?
That whoosh moment.
Yeah, all that hair
in
the wind in the hair. Yeah, all that.
Exactly. So you have the same feeling in your body. You have adrenaline. It's causing some feeling in your stomach, and instead of labeling it nerves, you're projecting forward. You're seeing something positive happening, and you're labeling it excitement. So as you rightly put it a few moments ago, fear and excitement are the same thing. In the body, they're the same thing. It's just adrenaline. So if we know that, we can just remind ourselves, okay, I'm just experiencing a feeling. It's okay. It's not going to kill me. If I label it, or if I frame it as excitement, then it helps me to combat it in a way that is more resourced. If I label it fear, then I retract from it and I get more tense. And I think the final thing that I would advise around nerves is to remember that whatever you're feeling in your body, you're in your body, and your audience are not in your body. They're somewhere outside of your body. You are looking out over a whole load of calm people. You can't see what's on their insides, and they are looking at you, and they can't see your insides. They can only see your outsides. So whatever shakes and wobbles feel like they're going on in your body, your audience can only normally see 10, 20% of what you feel, maximum. Sometimes they have no idea because they're just not thinking about you. They really don't care often. So whatever you're experiencing, they don't know. And it's quite nice to know that they don't know. Because if they don't know, then you don't need to worry about it so much. So when you realise that, you can take your nerves less seriously. And as soon as you break that cycle of taking things very seriously, you come back to your creativity, you come back to your resource. And when you can do that, that's when you remember the lines that you were trying to say. That's when you find new connections spontaneously in the moment. That's when you smile and make your audience laugh. And that's when your public speaking becomes better.
Fantastic. So there's so much you've just shared with us today, but I think the really great takeaways I've sort of taken away from this is the idea of just focusing on your audience and think about what you can give them and provide for them, rather than thinking that it's all about you. Relabeling that experience that you might be having and trying to find a positive way of describing that experience, and then trusting that once you do start not piling on all this negativity on it, the positive stuff comes in, then all those weird adrenaline feelings that you're getting are going to start falling away, and then you're going to be able to revert back to who you are. And then more importantly, just be you.
Absolutely.
Just be you. I've been making notes. Well, no, this is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing. That's a really tricky one to say, isn't it? All this insight in there and really juicy stuff on public speaking. Where can people find more about you, Sarah?
Well, the best next step, I think, for people to to go for is to visit my website, gingerpublicspeaking.com. And there I have a free e-course which talks through 6 qualities of an inspiring speaker. That's my approach to public speaking. Rather than giving you a whole list of rules, you can actually unleash 6 qualities that live inside you already. And this free e-course will give you just a taster to that approach. You'll have 6 weeks of emails with some attached videos and extra resources, and it's all for free. It's a brilliant resource, and even better, it's all done in doodle form. So if you like little cartoons, which I've drawn myself with my art A-level talent, then you can go for that. I strongly feel that public speaking should be something that's fun and approachable, not something serious, and not something so focused around suits and PowerPoints. We can have fun, we can enjoy ourselves when we speak. So please, go ahead and sign up to the e-course if you like. gingerpublicspeaking.com again is the link.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sarah. And in terms of your videos, I just want to say that I came across Sarah on Twitter by seeing some of her videos on public speaking, and they're brilliant. And I'm going to embed a few of those on the blog post where you'll be able to find this episode of the podcast. So if you do want to see Sarah in action, there'll be some on the Head Trash blog, but I'm sure there'll be plenty as well on your own website as well, Sarah. So thank you for joining me today, Sarah.
Thank you so much. All the best.
Bye. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman here on The Head Trash Show. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate you leaving a review here on iTunes. And don't forget to pop over to headtrash.com to get your copy of our free 5 Steps to Clearing Head Trash guide. So now stay tuned for upcoming episodes and more tips and how-tos for clearing your head trash and reclaiming your headspace. Until next time, bye for now.